kick off what I think will be a really special session, and this is going to be a West Texas focused session. This gentleman, he has been to this legislative summit many years in a row, but in this particular case, he had multiple different travel arrangements that were canceled, and again, trying to get in last night. He came in this morning, so he made quite the effort to be here with everybody. And I know my good friend Congressman Jodey Arrington from Lubbock, but let me just tell you, let's give him a round of applause. It's okay. This guy has really showed some amazing leadership, and we're going to talk about some of the legislative wins. But he's chairman of the House Budget Committee. He's serving his 5th term, a Texas Tech Red Raider, somebody that has been passionate about serving West Texas, has the values of West Texas, a fiscal hawk, and his, I think, legacy in Congress will be somebody who truly believes that our kids and our grandkids do not need to be saddled with trillions of dollars of debt. And he has been an incredible leader in Washington, D.C. on that, and using the West Texas mentality. So y'all help me welcome my good friend, Jodey Arrington, to the stage.
Howdy.
Jodey, we got a great group of people here from all over Texas, in fact, all over West Texas, 21 years going. You're the chairman of the Budget Committee, and I want to rewind the clock to November of last year. President Trump is elected, and we start talking about consequential legislation. We start talking about what now the American public knows as one big beautiful bill. We start developing a plan to make sure that people's taxes are lower, to make sure that American energy dominance can continue, to make sure that our farmers and ranchers have the price loss coverage adjustments, and the farm bill can get passed. We start talking about things that every American family, including those right here in West Texas, are looking at with regards to taxes, small businesses that can thrive. This group of hardworking, patriotic Texans, I believe, is going to benefit massively, and this region is going to benefit massively from the legislation. Take us into what it means to pass a reconciliation bill, behind the scenes, some inside baseball, and how this thing got started.
Don't make me go through the year-long journey because I'm looking forward. It's been an arduous process. We had the thinnest majority in history in the House, so we really had to thread the needle to build consensus, and that's just with the House. To unlock this with the budget resolution, we couldn't lose more than one vote. We had fiscal reforms, energy policy. We had this thing loaded up. That's why it's big. It's beautiful because it's going to make the difference that you described in the lives of our fellow Americans, their pocketbooks, their family budgets, small businesses, family farms. Probably have the best farm bill embedded in this big, beautiful bill. But to unlock it, we couldn't lose one. And if you look back at the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, the last time we had unified Republican leadership in Congress and a Republican president where we could use reconciliation, which simply means when you have the trifecta, you can get a simple majority in the Senate to pass legislation. It has to conform to some parameters, has to be budgetary in nature, can't increase the deficit beyond 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. But we were able to do it then. We lost 22 Republicans passing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And this one is better. It's supercharged for the economy, for growth, for bringing down inflation and interest rates because we make the tax cuts permanent. We needed comparable tax treatment for small businesses. We got a corporate rate at 21%. We had record corporate revenue as a result, along with jobs, record investment, the lowest poverty rates in recorded history, lowest unemployment rate for females and minorities. The list goes on, unprecedented prosperity from lower taxes, lower regulation, the America First agenda. This piece of legislation is the principal vehicle to drive those policies and make the America First vision a reality in this country. Amen? And to make this nation safe, strong, and prosperous again. And the tax piece is a big part of that. What a lot of people don't appreciate, August, is that had we done nothing and the tax cuts expired, we're not even talking about deregulating the energy economy. We're not even talking about incentives to get people back to work and stop trapping people in dependence on the federal government, which is a horrible thing to do to our fellow Americans. We're only talking about the tax cuts here. They expire. That's a 22% tax hike on the average American after a 21% regressive inflation tax over the last 4 years. So it was important for business provisions like expensing, R&D, so that we can be the laboratory of innovation. You can go through the list of things. How about the death tax? How unfair is it for farmers and ranchers, family farmers, and independent oil and gas producers, and family businesses alike, paying property taxes, paying sales tax, paying income tax? They've paid taxes their whole lives. And had we not extended this and made it permanent, you'd have had the death tax exemption cut in half, which means when the next generation inherits it, more than likely they're going to have to sell the operation, just the assets, just to pay the taxes, which would be a disaster for our country, but especially rural America. So it's big because it's the largest tax cut, spending cuts, generational welfare reform, investment in defense and border security, and the list goes on. It's beautiful because of what it's going to do to unleash prosperity in this country. It's beautiful because we're having a heck of a time getting our Democrat colleagues in the Senate to pass the Farm Bill in 24 when we passed it out of the House. There ain't no more runway for our producers. We had to get this done. This was do or die. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's in there to strengthen the safety net. But God bless America. Our best days are ahead of us. And I think, as I said, God's grace has been shed on thee. Well, he's got a little bit more grace for the US of A. That's my message to you. Thank you all for your support for this guy and for me and for all the West Texas delegation. Remember, our guy, August Pfluger, fighter pilot from the lower Concho Valley, was elected. I'm in charge of the budget committee. I don't know, 40, 50 people. He's in charge of the largest conservative caucus in the Republican Congress, probably in the state, in the House and Senate, like 180 members. I promise you, I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I needed to do at the tip of the spear for this budget procedural tool to lock in all these good policies if it weren't for my wingman, August Pfluger. It's worked out perfectly because you sent us the right guy to represent West Texas.
Hey, he's a pretty good cheerleader. I might invite him back.
Were these 1-minute responses? I forgot to read the fine print in this deal.
You know, that death tax exemption would have gone to $6.5 million had we not passed that bill. Instead, as a married couple, it's $30 million. $15 million per person, $30 million. There's some good claps back there for
permanent.
Permanent. That's a permanent tax provision. Jodey and I sat with the Speaker of the House, Steve Scalise, and many of the other leaders there in the House for the last 7 or 8 months. I want to get into some of the specific provisions, and I want to get into the Texas reimbursement, which was a really big thing. But just give this room a sense of the savings that we garnered, where we are with regards to debt and deficit, and how historic this is.
Are you ready to be really depressed for just a minute? But there's silver lining, and it's what we did in this bill, and it's unprecedented. We cut $1.5 trillion in wasteful, unnecessary, I think even unconstitutional spending in the people's government. That hasn't happened ever. It's twofold, the deepest reduction in wasteful Washington spending in the history of the country. And spending is what's driving, it's your money. And that's the problem, is that we're not spending it like it's your money. And stewardship has been lost on both parties, by the way. I see this as an exercise to start building back the muscle memory that Republicans have lost over the years, and the mantle of fiscal responsibility that we've dropped somewhere along the way. Here's the most unfair thing about it all. That $36 trillion in debt and rising, that $2 trillion now that we're having to borrow to pay a $7 trillion federal budget and rising, that $1 trillion in interest just to service the debt, which is more than we spend on Medicare and all of national defense, is a tax on our children. So you want to talk about an unfair tax? They're going to pay this. They're going to pay it one way or another. We either go off the cliff like Greece, or a slow decline, or we inflate this debt away, which will destroy their future, destroy their prospects of the land of opportunity. And they have no clue because they don't have a vote. So when we increase deficit spending, we're just deferring the tax on our children. And that was my mantra through this. Again, I had a lot of air cover from our RSC chairman, but that's the level of unsustainability that this nation is on in terms of our fiscal trajectory and our rapid financial decline. And quite frankly, I think what we need to go off, as President Trump says, to have the economy launch like a rocket ship, you're going to have to shed the $2 trillion in annual borrowing, because that's money that should be in the hands of the small businesses, in private investment where it can produce something of value, better jobs, bigger paychecks, not the least productive use, which is more federal programs that, quite frankly, are failing us. They're failing the people that use them, and they're being defrauded by people who are ineligible and don't need them. And so this was a great exercise in getting our fiscal house in order. And let me be clear, this isn't going to save this country from irreparable debt collapse. But it's the first significant and meaningful step to get us back on track. The Texas two-step for doing what our forefathers, the greatest generation, did coming out of World War II, because we're in higher levels of indebtedness, debt to economic output, than we've ever been, exceeding World War II for the first time. And we're in relative peace and prosperity. The Texas two-step: unleash growth, bend the curve on spending, so that we break this cycle, and it is a death spiral, break the cycle where we're borrowing and spending faster than we're growing the economy. Reverse that, stabilize the debt, bring the debt to GDP down, and America will continue to be the dominant influence for the 21st century. But I promise you this, it won't be China, although we got to take care of those adversarial threats. It won't be the border, but the lawlessness and chaos had to stop. Like most great civilizations and nations in the history of the world, it's the rot from within. And one element of that is lack of fiscal responsibility and bankrupting the country. And I'm very proud of this first big step, August. But what I want, and I hope you're seeing it, I hope we change the culture of Congress in Washington to actually consider our children and their future and our global leadership in the world when they're out in the world trying to make a living for their families.
That is absolutely right. And there's so many provisions. I want to get into some of the details, but I kind of mentioned that there was a reimbursement for the state of Texas. It's not going to surprise anybody in this room to know that over the past 4 years, with the surge of illegal immigration that came into Texas, that through the National Guard, the governor had to send the National Guard to the border. We had Operation Stone Garden, which involved sheriff's departments from all over the state of Texas that had to go fill in at the southern border to do what the federal government should have been doing. You have damages to property that occurred along the Rio Grande Valley, along ranches that were closer to the border, and then you had just communities that had to pay an unfunded mandate, whether it was through the hospital and healthcare system or the county government and the jails. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But very proud, and we talked directly with the president about this, about what Texas did that wasn't fair to Texans. It wasn't fair to all of you to have to pay taxes here locally and at the federal level and to not get the service that we needed for protecting. And through the common defense, the Constitution clearly outlines that the common defense is the federal government's responsibility. Folks, we got almost $12 billion from the president directly to the state of Texas as a reimbursement for all, and an acknowledgement for all of the things that the state of Texas has done over the past 4 years to make sure, not making us whole, but to make sure that we get a little bit closer to that number, which we're very proud to have gotten that done.
And by the way, August spoke to the governor directly, and he got a call from the president. You don't think this guy has influence? I mean, this is the thing. In West Texas, this is what we say. We got to be more than just a vote. If all you can count on from August and me and Drew and Brooks is a vote, we're screwed. I'm trying to be just crass this morning because I don't see any kids. We're screwed. We've got to convert our time and effort and our vote into influence. And we got to get into leadership roles so that we can have West Texas values influence the outcome. That's what's happening with this guy. And you know, you're right. The governor did the right thing. The Constitution's clear. When there's an invasion or there's imminent threat such that will not permit delay, those are the black letter of the Constitution. It is the right and the duty of a state to protect its citizen. And our state did it with a lot of harassment and obstruction by the federal government. It's one thing for them to fail to fulfill their duty and to be derelict about the common defense. It's a whole nother thing for them to have obstructed Texas to simply defend our sovereignty and the safety of our citizens. So that's a moral victory as much as it is a financial victory, wouldn't you say?
Jodey, give us some details. Let's start with agriculture. We're going to go
Rapid fire?
Rapid fire, 1 minute responses. Give us the details about how our agricultural producers, our farmers and ranchers benefit from one big beautiful bill.
This has been one of the worst 3 year, at least, runs for ag. Weather, drought, floods, and then we've had a farm bill stopgap, which is, let me tell you, the biggest disaster, 40-year high inflation, input cost. It doesn't matter what your price is. Our safety net is based on price. So what? Even if you get a good price, if your fertilizer, your seed, your fuel, if all your inputs are through the roof, it's not going to work. By executive order, SNAP was adjusted by about $280 billion, 22% higher than food inflation. But nobody did anything for the producer safety net, which, by the way, impacts all of us with safe, affordable, and abundant supply of food. And food security is national security. This, I believe, and you can talk to the farmers, they're more credible than I am about this because, you know, they're on the turn row where it matters. $60 billion to strengthen the safety net. That's ARC and PLC for some of the ag policy nerds. It's billions in crop insurance enhancements. Basically, we just make the risk management tools relevant to the current economy so that we can do what benefits every American, stabilize the ag economy. Stabilize the ag economy. Because what we don't want to happen, ladies and gentlemen, and you don't have to be from San Angelo or Plainview, Texas, to figure this out. We don't want to depend on other countries to feed us like we found out we depended on them for our drugs after COVID and our computer chips from Taiwan that run everything. The president's right about reciprocal trade, and if you think it's bad to wait for your car on the lot with no computer chip, wait till you're having to beg another country, adversarial or not, for your fuel and your food. So big deal for farmers.
This reminds me of the podcast we did recently where we just kept going. The
There's
podcast is called Right to the Point, and we got right off the point. Rapid fire.
Okay, rapid fire.
Tell our
I'm gonna
energy
do better
producers.
this next time. There's so much good in there. I want y'all to know what we got in there.
Tell our energy producers, those that are involved
Yep.
in the energy business, the benefits of this one big beautiful bill.
Well, first of all, we get the boot of the federal government off your neck, because that's been the biggest problem, is just a whole of government attack on our bread and butter. 80% of the cranks turning in this economy come from oil and gas. Okay, so specifics. Quit distorting the markets and funneling capital to otherwise not very reliable, not very efficient energy sources away from our most reliable source, oil and gas. It was natural gas and the shale revolution that made us the leader in emissions reductions. It doesn't make any sense. So we repealed the distortionary tax subsidies, about $500 billion. We repeal unnecessary regulations like the methane gas fee. He led on that, by the way. He let me join him. But that's a big deal because about 80%, I think, you can correct me, of the oil and gas produced in this country are from the independent producers, and they're the ones that were getting hit unnecessarily by this burdensome regulation. We open up domestic production by millions and millions of acres of land onshore and offshore that were fallow, and we streamline the permitting process. I mean, half the problem is it takes a lifetime to get a permit to build a pipeline or get a terminal so that approved so we can ship this freedom molecule to our allies in Europe. By the way, the EU deal, it's not out yet. Some of the vague parameters are. One of them is, I don't know how the president did it, but 0 tariffs for our stuff, 15% of tariffs on their stuff, and they purchase $250 billion of energy product every year for the next 3 years. I mean, I think he probably understands the art of the deal, and he understands we got the bigger stick if we use it. Okay, was that rapid?
That was rapid, yeah, ish.
I'm winded.
He's on the edge of his seat. I don't know if you see the passion here, but this is a day-to-day basis thing. In addition, anybody heard of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? That thing was depleted from 2021 to 2024. Half of it was gone, 350 million barrels for political expediency, a political emergency, not a hurricane, not a national security issue, but a political emergency. So this bill is putting billions of dollars back into the SPR to rebuild the caverns, to refill the actual product. It doesn't do all of it, but that's part of this bill, is that we need to be thinking about what's that next emergency where we need oil and gas to play a role and have it withheld. Let's go to healthcare. A lot of provisions, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. If you went to a town hall with me yesterday, you would have seen some of that. But there's some chuckles in the room from those that were there. But healthcare, rural healthcare. Nobody has championed rural healthcare better than Jodey Arrington. Nobody has stood up for it as a Texan and as a rural citizen than Jodey. So the provisions that we put into this bill, and if you're hearing things like, well, Medicare has been sabotaged or attacked, that's false. Medicare wasn't touched. Let's talk about the common sense requirements for Medicaid and how every single recipient of Medicaid in the state of Texas will now get a better service as a result of this bill.
Politicians have been talking about this like they talked about moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Like every party's political leadership has made these commitments. Stop with the waste, fraud, and abuse. In 23, it was $250 billion government, and that's not government-wide. That's like 70 programs. And GAO said that were some of the most significant perpetrators of improper payments weren't even included. That's more than we spend on the entire United States Army. That's more than Russia's economy over a 10-year budget window. It's more than we spend on Homeland Security. I think you get the point. We're frittering away too much of your tax money. And it comes in lots of waste, fraud, and abuse. And I can break those down, but suffice it to say, even just in Medicaid, in 23 it was $50 billion. Over the last 10 years, waste, fraud, and abuse coming out of the Medicaid program, which makes that program unsustainable, you see, because none of these programs are sustainable. Let's be clear. At $36 trillion, and we're taking on too much water, the ship's gonna sink. Medicaid has gone from $400 billion to over $600 billion since COVID, and it'll be $1 trillion at the end of this budget window. We can't keep up with it. And you gotta find ways to reform and reduce spending or increase revenue. And the easiest and best place to start is the waste, fraud, and abuse. That $500 billion, roughly, it's $546 billion over the last 10 years. That would have given 6 million Americans health insurance, just to put it in perspective. I mean, SNAP is similar. All we said is, let's go back to the Bill Clinton era common sense work requirements for healthy, able-bodied adults. I think talk about common sense, there's a social compact between working, tax-paying Americans and people who need the safety net for no fault of their own, or they need it temporarily to bounce back. It's being abused. States, there's a gaping loopholes where states don't enforce those work requirements that are on the books today because they can. California doesn't enforce any work requirement. Not a single person on SNAP that's able to work is enforced to actually fulfill a 20-hour-a-week work requirement, which, by the way, is lower than the Bill Clinton standard. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to hear we're kicking people off, ripping them off of the safety net, vulnerable Americans, throwing them to the streets and to the wolves, and taking bread from the mouths of hungry children. You know, it's sad. I think it's predatory, and it's obviously completely and patently false. What we're saying is, if you just enforce the laws on the books today and make sure that people who are ineligible aren't receiving benefits, people here in this country illegally should not benefit from the social safety nets that are not solvent even for our own citizens. And that if you are able to work, the social compact is you go to work, go to school, community service, do something. And it's not even more than the dollars and cents. It's about the soul. It's about how God created us. We don't want to deprive people of the dignity and the blessing of work, right? So that's what this is about, but it's going to be demagogue from now into the midterms. Here's one example. In the Senate, there was an amendment. They put it out there just to put people on record. It said, we will prohibit basically belt and suspenders on the illegal immigrant. I know this is too long. 9,000 Look, we should treat everybody with dignity and respect, even when we detain people who are here in this country illegally. That is the American way, okay? But to catch people, release them, not hold them accountable, millions of people coming in here, we don't know where they're from, what their intentions are. $9,000, according to Numbers USA, is what we spend in social services on people here in this country illegally. Guys, that's more than we spend on America's most vulnerable in Medicaid. That's more than we spend on our veterans for their retired military benefits in total. This country's gotten upside down, and it's time to turn it right side up. It's time to get us back on the path of reasonableness, common sense, and taxpayer stewardship. So no, we're not kicking people off, ripping them off. It's there for the vulnerable. It's there for the future vulnerable. But it won't be there if we continue to allow all this fraudulent and wasteful spending.
In Texas, the state legislature, thanks to Representative Brooks Landgraf, Representative Drew Darby, Speaker of the House Dustin Burrows from Lubbock, decided to keep Medicaid for those that were disabled, for children, for pregnant women, for the elderly, for those that the program was truly designed for. 41 other states decided, however, that they would expand into the working age population, which is why for the first time ever, the federal government has said, okay, for those 41 states, you now have a work requirement to qualify for those benefits, in addition to what was done for the food program, SNAP. You now have to work 80 hours a month, volunteer, seek a job, do something that gets you out of the situation, and I think delivers that program to the people that it was supposed to be delivered in a much better way. And we're proud of the work that was done there. But oh, by the way, it also protects rural health care. It also protects our rural facilities here in West Texas, our community health centers, our hospitals, the clinics, the nurses and the technicians, those that are giving us that health care, which is hard to get people in some of these small towns. It's very difficult. Y'all know that much better than I do. This big, beautiful bill protects those small towns in a way that, while saving money that we never could have gotten to without the leadership of Jodey.
Can I mention something, because I didn't touch on the rural health, just to say, we're not going to fund the rural health. We have done a lot of work on it. Medicare dependent hospitals, critical access hospitals, other add-on payments, low volume adjustment. I could keep going. Our recent payment model reform, rural emergency hospitals, designation, so you don't have to have inpatient. It was mandatory before. It's a huge fixed cost. So we're doing things. Telehealth expansion was in there, HSA expansion, health savings accounts. But the biggest thing, and transformative I would add, is the $50 billion in Rural Health Transformation Fund. $50 billion represents 1.5 times what rural hospitals get from Medicaid payments. 7% is all they get in total vis-a-vis rural and urban areas. It's about $19 billion. This is going to be $10 billion a year for 5 years, and it's in partnership with states so we can move away from volume-based, hospital-style based, and do it based on outcomes. Cost savings, efficiency, quality health outcomes. That's the way I think we ought to be funding healthcare. And this gets back to the 50 laboratories of innovation in partnership with the states and the federal government. And I think we're going to see some great strategies and innovative policies that we can implement across the country because of this big investment. It's a huge investment in rural healthcare.
We've eaten into a little bit of the networking break, but we appreciate Jodey being here. I've got one more question for you. So I want you to be thinking about it. And while I'm going to ask you the question now, give it some thought. You can plead the fifth, but do you have any Donald J. Trump stories for us that you want to talk about? So just think about it here for just a second. I see there's some folks I want to recognize, and before he leaves the room, Colonel Norton and Chief Neil from Goodfellow Air Force Base. They're just taking over. They're just the new command team that has taken over. Y'all, the men and women that serve at Goodfellow, that serve at Dyess Air Force Base, where Jodey represents, you can't imagine the dedication that they and their families provide for this country day in and day out, moving from duty station to duty station. We've got a new commander, a new command chief. Let's give Colonel Norton and his team a round of applause. All right, Jodey, any Donald Trump stories that you want to say?
Well, since you're a former military guy, we have to say the most important job and the most dangerous is to provide for the common defense, these guys in the uniforms. And this was the most significant investment in warcraft, munitions replenishment, warcraft development, all the things that prepare us to address the threats and prepare our warfighters, the stuff the Pentagon ought to be focused on. But it also increased the benefits and pay for our military families. Like, who else deserves more than they do? And sadly, a lot of these guys are depending on programs in the federal government because we're not paying them enough. So anyway, God bless our men and women in the armed services. Look, you were there. The prayer blanket. I had a lady who represented a group of ladies from Lubbock who prayed. They knit a quilt and prayed over the quilt and knit various verses of the Bible in the quilt. And I love this gal, Donna, and her friends. And I thought, this is so West Texas. They want me to give this blanket to the president and tell him that there are some folks in West Texas who love God and love their country and believe he's the right guy for the job and that they're praying for his success. Seems harmless enough. But every time I took this blanket to the White House, they would confiscate it and say, you can't take it. We'll make sure the president gets it. And we'll send a nice little note back to Donna Henthorne and her group. And I said, no. I used to work at the White House. I know where this goes. The president will never see it. So I held on to that blanket and for a year. And then I was invited to join August and several others from Texas on a trip to the Permian Basin with the president on Air Force One. Well, that was my opportunity. So I packed it in a suitcase. I know that the Secret Service thought I was bringing a bomb onto the plane because it was so big. And I finally had my moment to go deliver it. But earlier that day, one of the guys that was flying with us had been tested for COVID. We were all tested. This was in the height of the COVID era. And Louis Gohmert had COVID, and we were all hanging out with him. When the president found out that we were with Louis unmasked, he just, let's just say he made sure we knew he wasn't comfortable with that, and we proceeded immediately to leave the little Oval Office in the sky and find a corner to hide in. But I brought this blanket, I dragged this blanket up there with me, and I'd waited for a year, so I all but begged the president, would you please take a picture with me? I have 2 pictures with the president. One, he was red-faced angry about this whole thing. But I got one picture where it's me holding the blanket by myself, and he's way over here, and he's just like this. And I'm smiling for the camera. I'm like, and like just perfect timing, they go, okay, Mr. President, 1, 2, 3. And he kind of takes a step closer and gives a big smile. And that's the front page of the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. Nobody knows the real story. It just said, Arrington hands the commander-in-chief a prayer blanket. They don't realize that blanket was going to have to be my parachute when he threw my country ass off Air Force One. God bless and go West Texas.
Thank you.